Hello, I hope that you are doing well today. I am Dr. Toni, and if you have purchased already the Reset, a High Achiever's Guide to Freedom and Fulfillment, I want to say thank you. But I also want to say, I'm sorry. I have an apology because what I found as I was tending to some of the last pieces that I'm putting together for the audio course version of the Reset, I found a misprint. And I was surprised by the misprint that I found because I've been through this document. I've been through this book so many times. And I've also had others go through the book many times as well. And so we missed a misprint. We made a mistake. And the reason this misprint matters is because it's with regard to Hebb's law. And I talk about that on page 157. So if you go to page 157 in your book, you will see that I wrote, according to Hebb's law, what wires together, fires together, and that is inaccurate. The correct way to write and say that is that what fires together, wires together. And so if you have the book, you can actually just switch. The misprint was that the F from fires needed to move over to wires, and the W from wires needed to move over to fires. So those two letters were misplaced, but those two misprinted letters change the meaning of that very important statement, very important sentence, and very important theory with regard to Hebb's law. It is what helps us to share about neuroplasticity in the brain, that cells fire off neuronal connections going. And when cells in our brains are firing off these neuronal connections, these synapses that fire together repetitively begin to wire together. They begin to have an association with one another. And that is one of the ways that habits are unintentionally created mentally through our brain connections. And also one of the ways that we can rewire habits in our brain, which is what we are doing with the Reset in many ways. And so I want it to be clear what Hebb's law is and the correct statement that what fires together with regard to the brain, the synapses, the neurons, what fires together repetitively begins to wire together. Those creations are associated with one another in the brain. And we want to be clear about what that is. So I apologize for that misprint. And I also want to share with you something that really, I believe to be really important came out of my discovery of this misprint. So if you stay tuned for another moment, I think you're going to want to hear this lesson that came up. This misprint, this mistake brought up a really important topic for me. This misprint, although it is now addressed, it didn't do so. This addressing hasn't happened without creating an ironic and invaluable story, which I would like to share with you today, because it is a really important piece of what many of us high achievers, leaders, parenting professionals need to hear and need to deal with in our own ways. And I also want you to know that I'm going to be providing an updated e-copy for those that have an e-copy or purchased a hard copy prior to April 4th. And so you can go ahead and you can download that in the link that I share so that you have the updated without the misprint in it. But not all that long ago, one of my biggest secret fears had been that I would do or say something wrong. That I would do or say something wrong. And by wrong, I mean wrong, but also that would just be judged as bad or wrong, or maybe annoying or rude, or whatever the negative wrongness would be that would be ascribed to it. I feared that. I didn't realize how fearful I actually was about all of that until I became an entrepreneur who was solely responsible for sharing my message and my marketing about my business. Now, prior to becoming an entrepreneur, I'd gone through so much schooling and ongoing training to ensure that I'd know a lot, that I'd done a lot, that I'd trained a lot. And that made me feel like, oh, okay, well, this is going to reduce the likelihood that I mess up or that I'm negatively judged or that I'm going to say something wrong or do something inaccurately or misrepresent or misunderstand. Like it's going to reduce the likelihood that I'll be wrong or make a mistake. All this training, all this education. But after becoming an entrepreneur, I noticed a time period where I almost started to dabble in this shiny object syndrome, which at the time didn't fully notice was happening. But then I started to see that a little bit of patterns and I saw that. But at some point I was dabbling in this shiny object syndrome without realizing it at first. I had just gotten sucked into thinking that if I just kept getting more trainings, more certifications and more experience, then I'd be less likely to make a mistake and people would be less likely to ignore or reject or otherwise judge me in some negative way or think that I'm wrong in some way. And so even though I was doing that before becoming an entrepreneur, it became so much more evident when I was buying certifications or buying into certain courses or classes, where it's like, I already actually know a lot of this. It's not that there wasn't something there for me to learn. I do believe there's often something more to learn, even in courses that I've had experience with. But the thing that needed to be tended to was there was pressure to show that I'd know and learn as much as I could so that I could be the best that I could, so that I wouldn't get it wrong, so that I would get it right, so that I wouldn't mess up. Tad flavor of perfectionism in there, right? On the surface, it seems okay, justifiable even to not want to get things wrong, to want to be well trained, right? Like that makes sense on the surface. But if the reason beneath it is a pressure to be perfect or avoid ever being perceived as wrong or doing or saying anything wrong or preventing any possible mistake, which is not possible, then that is actually not helpful or healthy in the long run. And so beneath the surface, for me, there was this inadvertent pressure to be perfect, even though I wasn't fully aware of it at first, and clearly over time was able to unveil it and work with it. But ultimately, it translated to some decisions being made from the need to be right, or at the very least to avoid being wrong, and the need to preemptively protect myself from negative judgments and backlash or other potential psychological harm that I feared, worried, or just wanted to prevent happening. And so my stance was defensive. My stance in my business was a defensive one, just like my stance in my intimate relationships had previously been more on the defense side. And I didn't want that, but I didn't want to disappoint people. I didn't want to be dismissed by people either. And so this pressure to not get it wrong, this pressure to get it all right all the time, was something that was in the background fueling decisions, even in my business, and it needed to be addressed. And you know that in the reset, if you've dove into it already, that this is something that we address in the reset, are certain beliefs or fears that we have going on in the background that we need to peel back and address. And so what happened with me was that it actually put me between a rock and a hard place, because I knew I couldn't possibly be perfect or right all the time. And even if I tried, it wouldn't feel authentic to me, right? Because I wouldn't be relatable to others and it wouldn't really be real, because it's not possible like to just be perfect. It's just, there's a separation between me and others. If I'm saying I want to help someone, but I've got it all together all the time, there's this, it doesn't feel right. It's not authentic, right? People wouldn't like that, and neither would I. So it just doesn't work. It didn't work. But at the same time, dropping my defensive stance meant being vulnerable and opening myself up for the real acceptance that, like, I'm going to mess up. I'm going to get it wrong. I'm going to be vulnerable sometimes. I'm going to fail sometimes. I'm going to make mistakes sometimes. That felt so much more vulnerable than I'd already been practicing. So I'd already been practicing vulnerability in various areas of my life at that point in time. And so at that point is when I noticed imposter syndrome amping up more because of all the trainings, for all the degrees, certifications, education, courses, and experience. If that wasn't enough to protect me from imperfection, from failings, from mess ups, from judgments, from mishaps, from potential disappointments, from disapprovals and rejections, then what was? What could protect me from all of that? What could prevent all of that? And the answer is nothing. Nothing. Nothing can prevent all of that from ever happening ever again. Nothing I could do could protect me from potentially falling or failing or disappointing, misspelling, misspeaking, or otherwise making a mistake or some other mishap. And so I had a choice to make. The way I saw it, I had three general options. One, I could keep building up my defense systems to prepare for the inevitable mishap. So keep building up that guard, building up that guard, building up that guard. Or two, I could pull back on pursuing my big dreams, my big mission, using my voice, putting myself out there, sharing my experience, my knowledge, my gifts that I want to use to contribute to the world in the way that I desire. I could just pull back from pursuing all of that too loudly. Because if I pull back, then I'm less likely to be, my mistakes are less likely to be seen, or I'm less likely to make a mistake. Or three, I could go the route of authentic vulnerability, where I just accept the inevitability of my imperfections and mistakes, that they're just part of life, and viewing them as opportunities to learn and grow was something that I could do, as I simply put one foot in front of the other while anchoring into the integrity of my own core values as often as I possibly could. And so I chose number three, to go the route of authentic vulnerability, where I accept I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to get it wrong sometimes. I cannot always put the pressure on myself to get it right, because I'm not always going to get it right. Doing the best I can within integrity and alignment with my core values is the best that I can do, with this willingness to learn and grow when I make a mistake. I chose number three. And so there's irony in my finding a misprint in my already published book, a mistake in my already published book a month after it hit best-selling status on Amazon in multiple categories. This book, a piece of art and passion that is so near and dear to my heart, had a misprint. I'd messed up. After reviewing and editing the document 100 times myself, after having others review and edit it, after recording my first initial draft of the book's audio, and still, after all of those eyes were on it, after all of those times, still having made a mistake, having a misprint. How was that possible? Done everything humanly possible to prevent a mistake, and yet a mistake still happened. Well, how's it possible? I don't know. Maybe it's because my brain had read the statement so many times that the two switch letters that created the misprint just didn't register anymore. Or maybe it's because I just knew the correct phrasing of the statement, and so I just read it and said it correctly. That's how my brain registered it. And so it just automatically was read as correct each time I went through the document. Or maybe it's because I and others who reviewed it, we'd been looking for more obvious edits and thus skipped over the minor details of this erroneous sentence with these two letters switched, even though it changes the whole idea of that sentence. We missed it. Maybe it's all of the above. Maybe it's something else. I suspect it's a combination of the above. But the truth is, at this particular moment, it doesn't matter why it was possible. It doesn't matter why or how it happens, because I choose number three. I chose number three, and I continue to choose number three, which means I could beat up on myself. I could fight to defend myself, but those would be more consistent with choices one or two that I just shared. And I still don't choose them. I choose again and again and again. I actively choose in this moment and the next which option I am going to lean into. And the one that I choose is number three. I get to learn and grow from my mistakes, my mishaps, my getting it wrongs. And now what matters most is how I handle it. And I share this story of mine with you all because I know how invaluable these kinds of vulnerable shares are. I've been described by some as having it all together or being polished, or oftentimes, I don't know how you do it all. But guess what? I'm human. I allow my inspiration to guide my way, but I am not without perfection. I make mistakes. And I reserve my right to grow and learn. Because regardless of how many degrees we do or don't have, regardless of how much money, education, or even years of experience that we have, we're all imperfect humans. You are, I am, we are. We're going to mess up sometimes. We're going to fall. We're going to fail. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to get it wrong. Some people won't like us. No matter how hard we try to get it right, we're going to get it wrong. And the harder we try to get it right, the more we're going to get it wrong because of the pressure. The added pressure creates added stress and makes it harder for our brains and our bodies to function optimally. And so the more we release that pressure of perfection or that pressure to get it right all the time, the irony is then as we release that pressure, then the more we actually get it right and the less we get it wrong or mess up. And yet still, even then, you might still mess up. Some people might feel disappointed by us or our decisions. Some people might still dismiss us, reject us, not want us. And yet, we still have a choice. We can beat ourselves up or tear ourselves down or tell ourselves how simple it was that we should have caught it. We can make ourselves small and hide. We can beat ourselves up to protect and defend. We can build ourselves, beef ourselves up to protect and to defend. We can make it mean we're not enough in some way, or we can choose to learn and to grow from it all. When we choose to learn and grow from our mistakes, it does require some forgiveness for ourselves, grace for ourselves, which we can then also share with others more too. But when we choose to learn and grow from our mistakes, we can then take one step at a time to move forward, anchored into our core values as best we can, all of which I share how to do step by step, practical, powerful application by practical, powerful application right there in that book, in the reset. And then we can make those decisions, take those steps, whatever they are for us, again and again and again. And we can decide again and again and again, because we can't always get it right. We can't always be right, but we can always evolve. Experience, learn, grow. That is how we evolve. And I personally prefer to evolve rather than stay stuck. And so in many ways, I am now grateful for this mistake that I made and caught and rectified. It's given me an opportunity to revisit an area that I used to struggle in. I used to have a lot of fear around. And this time, as I revisit it, I'm not scared. That's a really beautiful evolution, don't you think? And I get to share it with you. And so the misprint has been fixed. It's resolved. If you purchase the book after the April 4th, then you'll be receiving the updated version. There's no misprint in it. And if you purchase the book prior to April 4th, you're going to be receiving a free updated ebook version of the book. And if you gifted the ebook to anyone, you can share that download with them. And as an additional gift of gratitude for your understanding, I'm sharing a discount code for the new audio course version of the reset, where I walk you step by step with my audio through the reset process. Plus, you get a workbook, which is printable, so that you can use that as an additional supplemental guide throughout this process. It is the best companion to the book that there is, and it includes print. It's printable, right? So you can actually print it out and type in it, so you can use it along your reset journey. Plus, free access to submission of questions to me directly which will then be entered in for an opportunity for me to answer them and put them in the audio course as recordings so that you can come back to them time and time again. And that audio course, should you choose to use that discount, is going to be available by April 22nd, 22. And I'm so excited to share that with you as well. So if you already have been having this amazing experience with the reset, I invite you to write a recommendation to help others. They can understand what the book is about and its many benefits just through simply reading your honest, genuine, authentic words that you share in your review. And as they explore that, they can decide if they would like to make that investment in themselves and in this process for their own lives. Thank you so much for being here with me. I'm so excited to share all of this with you. And I'm so grateful for your understanding. And as always, I remain in deep appreciation of all the many opportunities for growth that we will each continue to experience throughout this human life, this human journey, these human imperfections that we all have. With so much love and so much warmth and with so much wellness. I hope you have an amazing day. You're going to go ahead and receive the information to download what you need for your updated version. And I will leave a link if you have received the information about how to download the updated version. You'll also then receive a link if you're interested in that discount code for the upcoming audio version of the book. Thank you so much. Bye.